Hello, it's Martin, and in this video, as you can probably tell from the title, we will look at the new Porsche Macan EV configurator. Now, why should you listen to some random Eastern European guy on YouTube? Well, I work for an independent EV retailer in London, so I have quite a bit of experience with what people want. I had a chance to drive quite a few of the Taycans we sold, so I would like to think that I know a thing or two about electric cars and the market in general. So, without further talking, let me jump right in. I will configure the Macan 4, which is the entry-level model at the time of filming of this video, which is the 31st of January 2024. The configurator just went live recently, I think it was this week in the UK. The other option which you can get at the moment is the Macan Turbo, and supposedly those are on the two extreme ends of the spectrum, and Porsche will fill in the lineup over the coming months and years. So supposedly there will be the 4S, the GTS and so on. Don't know anything in particular about the Turbo S for the time being. The starting price is £69,800, so let's jump in and let's see what we get. I will compare it to the Turbo, and in certain situations it actually makes sense to go for the Turbo, but for the majority of people the entry-level model will be completely fine. The important thing is that if we look at the spec sheet, you do have quite a bit of power as standard already. So you basically get 300 kilowatts, which is 408 PS, lots of torque thanks to the electric motors, and crucially, unlike the Taycan, all Macans come with the same sized battery pack, which has a 100 kilowatt-hour capacity. 95 about of those are usable, and supposedly even in the real world, on the motorway at 70 miles per hour, it should be able to do about 300 miles. That's very, very promising. Obviously, the final judgment will be passed on them when they are road tested by reviewers, but that's all good. They also all feature the excellent DC rapid charging, which can charge them up to 80% in 21 minutes. Size-wise, I had a chance to drive the previous generation petrol Macan once, and I found it surprisingly cramped for the size of the vehicle. This one has grown a little bit, and because of the more efficient packaging, thanks to the battery being in the floor and the wheelbase being longer, there should be a lot more space on the inside compared to the predecessor, especially on the rear seats. So if you are planning to buy one as a family vehicle, it should be a much more usable option now. Let me start going through the options now, because otherwise we will be here forever. The standard colors are the solid white or black. I think if you are buying a car of this class, you should definitely go for a metallic or slightly kind of premium color, and they are grouped into different tiers. Personally, I am a huge fan of the Dolomite Silver. I know it's a bit boring, maybe I'm getting too old, but it's a very practical color, looks good, and especially if you accessorize it with some of the gloss black trims, it looks very smart. And being a neutral color, when the time comes to resell it, it shouldn't be too difficult because it's not very polarizing. Some of the blues are very nice as well, and I also particularly like the Aventurine Green Metallic. It's almost like a greyish green, not too in your face, but at £2,500 almost, I would be definitely sticking to the cheaper option. Moving on to the wheels, this is where you need to be very, very careful. It's very easy to go all in for the looks, go for some of the 22-inch wheels, and they do look stunning, but these will definitely impact your electric range and consumption significantly. With electric cars, generally speaking, the smaller the alloy, obviously the lighter the wheel, that improves efficiency. And also you will see that with the entry-level wheels, quite a few of them have a very filled-in design. That's for better aerodynamics. So you will probably want to stick to some of those if you actually want to get close to those 300 miles of real-world range. If range isn't a concern because this is, for example, your second vehicle in the family, then fair enough, go for whatever you like. I personally quite like the 21-inch option, and if we click at the I button, then you've got more detailed information about the actual alloy dimensions and what tires they take. You may notice that compared to the petrol Macan, the tires are a little bit narrower, so it's a staggered setup with the rears being 295 millimeters wide, and this again will be in an effort to improve the efficiency and squeeze out as much range from the battery pack as possible. Continuing further down, you can also get the wheels painted, but as a daily vehicle, I think this is really kind of going too far. You definitely shouldn't put performance tires on a daily Macan. So we will skip through all of that because I'm happy with the selection as it is. And let's move on to the interior. As standard, you get a boring black setup. Not very exciting, but it is a very practical setup. And again, just like with the silver on the outside, it is a quite universally accepted color scheme. The steering wheel is leather wrapped, but the seat bolsters on the sides are made from fake kind of vegan leather. And the inside of the seat, which you sit on, and the backrest, that's made from Sportex. Sportex is Porsche's kind of marketing name. It's quite a nice soft surface to sit on, and it means in the summer it doesn't get as kind of hot and sweaty like normal leather would. So I personally quite like it, but there are a couple of things to keep in mind with it because it's not all perfect. You've got the black, or you can go for the chalk beige color, but honestly trying to keep that clean will be a struggle. So if you wanted to go for anything extra, and I suspect many people will want to, is that you can go for the full leather packages. The middle of the seat will be leather as well, and obviously here you can still customize what color you prefer. Personally, I'm one of those obnoxious vegans, so I actually quite like that in the base trim you do not get the leather seats. So for the intents of purposes of this configuration, I will stick with that. But if you're configuring it yourself, I'm sure leather will be quite a popular option for the vast majority of people. If that's not enough, you can go for the extended leather package, and then you have got more of the dashboard and so on trimmed in actual leather as well. Again, a little bit excessive in my opinion, especially because I'm sure that even the base Porsche interior will feel very nice in terms of materials, fit and finish. The standard seats are the 8-way electric seats. So you've got electric adjustment as standard, but you do not have the memory. And also very important, this depends on how sensitive your back is, there is no lumbar support adjustment. So personally, the 14-way seats are the bare minimum in my eyes, and I would actually like to go for the sport seats. Don't be too scared. Yes, the side bolstering is quite a bit more pronounced, but you can inflate or deflate the sides, you can adjust the lumbar support, and they are still fairly comfortable. So unless you're quite large, the sport seats are actually quite a good option, and it's something I would want to have in one. Front heated seats come as standard, but if you want to keep the second row passengers happy, you can have rear heated seats as well. Or if you want to be more comfortable as a driver, you can go for the ventilation option. This will automatically kick you into the leather packages because obviously with the Alcantara it doesn't make much sense to do the ventilation. Likewise, the massaging function is quite nice on Porsches, but that will drop you down from the sport seats into the comfort seats, but with all the electric adjustment. Lastly, important to mention is that you can specify a third ISOFIX point on the front seat. So if you want to have 3 child seats which are ISOFIX anchored in at the same time, make sure to check that option. Moving back to the outside to some of the visual packages, you've got the off-road design packages. Now, this has absolutely nothing to do with off-roading, and in fact it makes it less practical because in the base trim you can see that the bottom cladding all around the vehicle is basically from matte plastic. If you go for any of the off-road packages, I will go for the one in the exterior color just to make it a bit more visible. Then you get these body color or gloss black painted trims, which do make the car look a little bit more aggressive, but they also make it much less practical, and yeah, not something I would personally care about. But if you're big into looks, obviously, do go for that. If you don't want the entire thing, you can just specify individual bits of it. For example, you can just go for the front bumper trim. But as I said, I will skip all of those. I like how the wing mirrors look. There is no problem with that. Very, very important to mention. With the Taycan, electric folding mirrors are a 230-ish pound extra, which is absolutely ridiculous considering the price of that car. Luckily on the Macan, they're fitted as standard across all the versions. One other thing which is unique to the Macan are the side blades. So they are these trims on the side spanning both doors. Those can be had in exterior color or as standard they are going to be in plastic. I personally would go for the gloss black ones just for the nice contrast with the silver. Of course, if you want to be a tryhard, feel free to go for the carbon ones. Next up, the charging port. As standard you get a manual one, so it's almost like a petrol flap, you just press it, it pops open, nothing revolutionary. If you want, you can pay about £400 extra for a motorized one, and then it nicely kind of sinks into the body panel and slides into it. It looks very elegant, but from the first initial reviews online, it doesn't seem to work the best. You kind of need to put your palm on it, wait for a couple of seconds, then it realizes what's happening. You could equip the Taycan with similar ones as well, but they had a dedicated touch kind of slider next to it, which you would touch and this charge port would open. It looks very slick, but honestly, not worth the hassle, and we have seen that in the winter they occasionally do freeze over, so not something I would personally bother with. What I would definitely want is the tow bar, especially if it's going to be used as a practical family vehicle. If you want to carry some bikes on the back or anything like that, having the tow bar is a lovely option. And despite the myth of electric cars not being able to tow, it can tow up to 2,000 kilos, or it can carry a vertical load of 80 kilograms, so that's perfectly suitable for a bike rack. Continuing down, the roof rails. So as standard, the car doesn't come with any roof rails at all. I think for practicality reasons, I would go for it. It also adds to the SUV look. You can choose which finish to go for depending on what color you go for and your personal preference. I would also definitely spec the panoramic roof. It's a bit more old school to some other electric cars in a sense that it's not quite a full single piece of glass on the roof, but the benefit is that it is actually an electronically opening roof. So if you want to get a bit of fresh air in the car in the summer, that gives you the option to do that. In this lettering tab, you can choose what badges you have and what color they are in. Some people really like to spend a lot of time on this just to make sure that the car really kind of meets their expectations and it's tailored to them. I couldn't care less, so we will skip that. With the powertrain is where it gets a bit more exciting, and this is where it gets very different compared to internal combustion engine vehicles. Some of the options you will see here are quite familiar. So for example, as standard with the base level Macan, you get steel suspension with normal dampers. One step up is you can still get the steel springs, but on top of that you have got adaptive dampers, meaning if you flick the car into sports mode, it will get a little bit stiffer. In comfort mode, it will slacken off. Personally, I think if you are speccing a Macan, it makes sense to go for the air suspension. I'm sure that Porsche engineers have tuned the steel suspension to perfection. It's going to be comfortable, it's going to be responsive, but with the air suspension, not only do you get guaranteed comfort, you also get the added flexibility of being able to adjust the ride height. So for example, if you want to overcome some obstacles or you want to take it off-roading, which I don't think many people will want to, that gives you the added flexibility. Or if you have a steep driveway to get up a curb, anything like that. So that's a nice thing in my eyes. The Porsche electric sports sound is something which I initially thought was a complete gimmick on electric cars. I like my electric cars quiet, it doesn't make sense to add fake noises, but the Porsche electric sound is actually done really, really well. So I'm going to tick it. It's not too expensive. On the Taycan, it doesn't only pump kind of sound through the interior speakers, but there's also an external speaker, and the car almost makes like a humming, idling sound even when it stood still. It just adds to the character, adds to the presence. It's a Porsche, and unlike some other manufacturers, it's not trying to be a V8 or a V6. It has its own kind of electric futuristic sound, and if you don't like it, you can always turn it off in the infotainment system. So if you want to drive a bit more sporty and you want the car to feel a little bit more special and engaging, it's a nice option to have. The Sports Chrono package is also a very popular option on Porsches because it gives you the analog and digital stopwatch on the top of the dashboard. So if I tick that option, you will see that that pops up on there. I honestly hate that stopwatch so much. I don't know why, I just don't think it belongs in an everyday car which is kind of futuristic, modern, clean, minimalist and electric. You will never take this on the track, so I would not bother with that at all. Note that unlike the Taycan, you still get the rotary drive mode selector on the steering wheel, even with the Sports Chrono package deselected. So that's a nice handy feature to have, because it means you can very quickly flick between normal and Sport or Sport Plus and the individual modes. So that's nice to have. Honestly, no stopwatch needed in my eyes then. You can also go for the compass if you wanted to go for the compass instead of the stopwatch. Again, I just think it makes the interior look a little bit too busy. The Power Steering Plus, it's a very nice feature, and for only £200 you might as well go for it. I believe on the Taycan it can potentially be unlocked post-purchase as a software unlock through the Porsche app, and it just means that it makes the steering feel very light at low speeds to aid with in-town maneuvering, but when you get out onto the motorway it will stiffen up to make the car a bit more stable. If you really want to go all out for handling and maneuverability, you can specify the Macan with rear axle steering now, so at low speeds the rear wheels will turn opposite to the front wheels to reduce the turning circle, to make parking and maneuvering in kind of parking garages easier, whereas at high speeds the rear wheels turn in the same direction as the front to aid with stability. It's nice to have, and honestly, if you find any kind of demo examples or used examples which you're looking at which have it, it's a lovely feature to have, but at £1,500 I would be skipping it on a brand new example. In terms of the lighting technology, you get full LED lights as standard, and they do look pretty smart already, so you don't have to worry about the car looking cheap from the factory. And in fact, we all know the story with Porsche headlights, so if you're not careful and leave the car on the street, they may get nicked. But in my eyes, one of the best modern inventions in the automotive industry are matrix headlights. I know they can split opinion because some drivers think that they are too powerful and dazzling, but basically what they do is that if you are driving towards a car or there is a car ahead of you, the camera in the windscreen can detect that vehicle and adjust the light beam accordingly to make sure that those cars are not dazzled. It doesn't always work perfectly, but especially if you drive a lot on country roads at night, it makes driving so much easier and safer because you can spot animals hiding in the bushes in the distance much earlier. So it's a feature I would definitely want. And not only does it change the technology, it also slightly changes the look of the headlight. So you do get a slightly more sophisticated looking headlight cluster. By the way, the daytime running lights are on the top, and the actual main beam and dipped beam, those are hidden in the lower part of the front bumper, almost looking like the air intake on the sides here. If you want to see how these matrix headlights work in the practice, feel free to check out a video I've done with my Mini. The Mini system is much less sophisticated than the Porsche, obviously, being a fraction of the cost, but you will get a feel for what it's good for. Moving onwards, I would definitely want automatically dimming mirrors all around, and the option which will really split opinion is the rear wiper. As standard, you can see the rear glass is kind of completely empty. There is no wiper blade at all, whereas if you go for the rear wiper, obviously that adds it at the bottom there. Some people love to have a rear wiper. I could not really care less. I think it actually looks much worse, and once you get used to these cars, many modern cars no longer come with a rear wiper, and the Macan is now quite steeply raked in the back for better aerodynamics. So I suspect that especially if you drive on country roads or at motorway speeds, the airstream will take all the rain off. And you've got so many cameras in these modern cars that it's not something I would particularly care about. Once you drive a Tesla Model Y, a Polestar 2, which have the same kind of shape to them, it doesn't really become an issue, has never bothered me, but that's something to consider if you are very particular about it. The other option is a heated windscreen, which does make defrosting the windscreen quicker. Pros and cons in an electric car: heated windscreens actually use much less power than using the front windscreen kind of demisters to heat up the windscreen and to melt the snow. So if you live in a cold climate, it may be worth considering, but it makes windscreen repairs a bit more difficult. Obviously the windscreen itself is more expensive, and also sometimes if you have any of the tags for toll roads, those may not work properly on a windscreen with the heating elements integrated in it, because those interfere with the signals. So I will leave this one up to you whether to go for. Likewise with privacy glass, you can now customize whether you want just privacy glass, just acoustically insulated laminated glass, or both options at the same time. I think with the silver color, the privacy glass makes sense. It will look a lot better in the back, and obviously gives you the protection from the sun for the kids in the back. And while initially it may be very tempting to go for the acoustically insulating glass as well to make the cabin even more refined, these new Macans now feature frameless windows, so I don't think most of the noise would come through the kind of glass itself. It's going to come from the edges where the glass meets the actual rubber seal. So I don't think double glazing will make that much of a difference. And from a practical point of view, what we often see as an electric car retailer is that if you get any parking dings on the doors from other people parking too close to you in a supermarket car park, they are practically impossible to remove on cars with double glazed windows, because the glass is so thick that the paintless dent remover people do not have enough clearance to get their tools in underneath the door skin and pop the dents out. So for all of those reasons, and the fact that you are saving about £800, I will leave that out. The transport and protection, you can get these kind of original Porsche accessories and so on, which are honestly a little bit of a rip-off. But anyways, moving on. Oh yeah, speaking of rip-offs, all of these interior options, like, you can go very extra with Porsches and you can really customize the color of the stitching and so on, but it's a daily car. Nobody on the used market will care. It's a tiny thing. Just please don't spend £3,500 on it. Doesn't make sense. If you find one which has it, then fair enough. But yeah, I wouldn't spec it from the factory. If you want to spruce up the interior, you can go for some of the different inlays in the door cards. For example, if you like aluminium, or if you prefer a more kind of old school look, those are the options. If I had to pick one myself, and I'm honestly quite fine with the standard ones, as you can tell, I'm not too much of a looks guy. I much rather kind of prefer the kind of the technology side of things. I would go for the matte carbon. If I go into the 360 view, that will pop up. Matte, in my eyes, is a lot more kind of timeless and elegant than going for high gloss trims. If you want something a bit more minimalist and cheaper, you can go for either the wood options or the brushed aluminium. Also works really nicely. It's a simple, timeless thing. It will not age too quickly. Another option of making the interior feel a little bit more special is the accent package Neodyme, which swaps the silver trims on the inside. So for example, the door handle trims for these almost like rose gold accents. So you see the bar which is spanning the entire dash has changed color. It looks a little bit tacky in the pictures, but honestly in person, if you for example go for a full black spec on the outside and the inside, it really just gives it that extra bit of pop without being too much in your face. It's quite subtle in person, so it's something to definitely consider at £380. I mean, yeah, you're swapping, silver for gold, but it's quite reasonably priced by Porsche standards. You can also go for these embossed crests on the headrests and so on. Just tacky. No. Let's skip all of that. Let's skip all of that. You don't need things to say Porsche or Macan. None of that stuff. And let's move on to the steering wheels. You have the kind of standard steering wheel with the base model. With the turbo, you do get the GT sports wheel, but you will see here some of them are in the Racetex kind of fabric. That's the kind of Alcantara-like material. So you see the form of the steering wheel changed slightly because it went into the GT shape, and the finish has changed as well into the Alcantara. For an everyday car, please do not get this option. And as I mentioned, I'm a vegan, crazy person, yes, blah, blah, blah. And this is technically kind of animal product free, but it's so impractical because the Alcantara or the kind of surface will collect all of your hand grease and so on. So over time, it goes from nice, soft and fluffy to kind of very compacted and hard, and it's very difficult to keep clean. So unless you wear racing gloves every single time, it's not a suitable option. What I would go for is the heated steering wheel. It's only £209. And in an electric car, the heated seats and heated steering wheel really help a lot, because those use much less power than heating the entire cabin or to heat the air in the cabin. So one way of staying comfortable in the winter is that, you know, you can just have those blasted, it doesn't really impact the range, and you can reduce the air conditioning temperature by a couple of degrees Celsius if you want to really kind of stretch out your range. You can also customize your keys and so on. Not something I would care about. It could be handy if you are an absolute baller and have multiple Porsches in the family and you want to differentiate, you know, when you have the keys side by side on the countertop, but definitely not the problem for me. On the base model, I would go for the stainless steel pedals. Can't believe that Porsche actually gives you kind of plastic rubberized pedals as standard. It looks a bit too cheap. And also side airbags in the rear compartment, yes please. This I hate. Safety equipment, especially airbags and so on, that should all be standard, especially from a luxury brand on a high-end vehicle, which is now costing about £80,000. That shouldn't be an option, that should just be included. But Mini ran over and all of these accessories are a little bit useless. Fire extinguisher, lol, as if that did anything if the battery caught on fire. But we will gloss over that one. Technology, as I said, is where I would go to town, but I appreciate many people buying Porsches will probably care more about the brand, the looks, perhaps the driving dynamics rather than the tech. But I still think there are some options which every Macan should have, and that at the very least is the adaptive cruise control. Even the fact that Porsche is sending these cars out with no adaptive cruise control as standard in 2024 is absolutely crazy to me. But hey ho, it's a driver's car, I suppose it's low on the priority list, and by putting it in as an option they can charge extra £500 for it. I think, especially given these are going to be used as daily vehicles on long road trips, when you go in the UK, if you go up to Scotland, if you go to see your family and so on, I would want it. It makes such a big difference in motorway drives. You can basically just set the speed and the car does the majority of the driving. And the Porsche systems in particular are very well tuned. So with Tesla, they are sometimes a little bit kind of jerky and so on, because honestly, Teslas, they try to be too clever for their own good occasionally. But with the Taycan and the other Porsches and VW products in general, it's a very smooth system. It can match the flow of traffic very well. It can come to a full complete stop in a traffic jam and then keep rolling on its own. So that's a must-have in my eyes. I would actually go one step higher for the Porsche InnoDrive with the active lane keeping. Two things to unpack there. The InnoDrive part of the system, that's for intelligent speed regulation. So for example, if the car detects a road sign with a new speed limit, the adaptive cruise control can automatically take over that speed limit. Also, it will slow down for bends, intersections and so on. I've reviewed the system for Wisely Automotive in the Taycan we had, and I will make sure I will link that in the top right hand corner as well. The active lane keeping is active lane centering. So as standard, you do have lane departure warning, meaning if you touch the lane markings on either side of the road, the car will gently kind of nudge you into the middle of the lane. But it's a very kind of reactive system. It lets you get very close to the edge of the road and only then intervenes. Whereas with the active lane keeping, the steering wheel goes kind of stiff and it tries to actively maintain the middle of the lane without ping-ponging from side to side. Again, for long journeys, I quite like it. If you don't like it, it's very easy to turn off. At least on the Taycan, the way it works is that if you have the adaptive cruise control fitted, you can then unlock the InnoDrive and the active lane keeping later on in the Porsche app or through the Porsche online account system. But I'm not quite sure how it works on the Macan, and it almost always makes sense to spec it from the factory because it will be cheaper than unlocking it later. So that's what I would want to have. You also can specify the surround view monitor, which means you get additional cameras in the wing mirrors and on the nose of the car. As standard, you do get a reversing camera and front and rear parking sensors, but with the surround view monitor, you get a 360-degree top-down view of the vehicle. I will be very interested to see how this works in practice, because Porsche is one of the companies where, how do I put this politely, it used to be trash. On the Taycan, it's the lowest resolution camera you can imagine. The image is distorted. You cannot rely on it whatsoever. So yeah, unless Porsche proves themselves that they have improved that system, for now, I'm not picking that option. Another gadget is the augmented reality head-up display. If you pick this, I think it actually forces you to go for the leather package, which I personally don't care for. And also it's almost £1,700. If you don't know what a head-up display is, it basically is a projector which projects some of the vital driving information into the windscreen. And with this one being augmented reality, it means that it projects over a massive surface area in the windscreen, and it doesn't project just kind of static text like speed limit information, but it actually overlays some markings onto the road. So it literally feels like you're piloting a fighter jet, but maybe not for £1,700. Comfort access I would definitely go for. On the Taycan, it can be unlocked post-purchase, but you need to be very careful with it. If you park your car on your driveway right next to your house, this is how cars get stolen these days, using relay attacks, where basically the thieves use special antennas to trick the car into thinking that the key is next to it or inside of it, and that's how it unlocks, and it just gets driven away. So if you have that fitted, be very careful where you leave your keys, or simply deselect it. But I like the convenience of it, and worst case scenario at home, you just keep the keys in a metal box and you are all safe. You've got other options as well. I never quite believed in 4-zone climate control systems. You know, what's the point? The air will mix in the cabin anyways. Electrics, roll-up sun blinds, may be good if you have kids, but in my eyes it's just one of those flimsy things which will just break, so skipping all of this. In the infotainment section, if you want to go extra fancy, you can go for the passenger display, and as you can see, that installs an additional screen in front of the front passenger, so they can have their own version of the infotainment. They can look at the maps, they can control radio and so on. But if I'm buying a car, I'm buying it for myself, so the passenger can do with the central screen. That's going to be good enough. The sound system I would 100% recommend to upgrade, especially this being a non-performance car, in a sense that it's your daily car. You will not listen to the engine, and obviously there's no engine to listen to because it's electric. So you will want to listen to music. The Bose is, I think, the bare minimum you should go for. I had the chance to listen to it in the Taycan. I'm sure the Macan is going to be a slightly different system. It gives you 710 watts of total power, and that's really what you would expect on a car of this class. I can't believe you have to pay extra for it. The base system, I believe, only has like 110, 120 watts of power. That's not acceptable. Like, I don't know what Porsche were thinking. And if you are really into music, I think the Burmester is the one to consider. It's really expensive. It's a big jump from the Bose to the Burmester, but that's the one which really delivers the top performance. And as I said, I've tried the Bose in the Taycan, and even that, like, it's decent, but it's not mind-blowing. So if you want fantastic music, I'm afraid it's basically almost a £4,000 option. With the charging stuff, luckily, Porsche learned their lessons from the Taycan, and back in the day with the Taycan, you had to specify a 150 kilowatt onboard booster if you wanted still fast-ish rapid charging on kind of almost medium power stations because of the 800 volt battery architecture. If this doesn't mean to you, don't worry about it. Basically, with the Macan, they have redesigned how the battery works, and that option is no longer needed, and you will get kind of consistently fast charging on all charging stations, and the car will no longer be the limit. It's the charge which will be the limit. So that's all good. I would go for the 230 volt socket in the back, though. It's just a handy feature to have if you want to kind of charge, you know, an old school laptop or something like that. So we've actually made it to the end. I actually quite like how it looks. I know when it was first launched, I thought it's a bit weird looking, and it has that bubbly shape, but that's for a very good reason, that that's aerodynamics, to squeeze out maximum range out of the car. From the side profile, it does look a little bit like a turtle, but that's okay, we will forgive it. It makes sense in the interest of science and getting the most range out, but yeah, the back is probably the weakest angle. But it looks quite aggressive from the front. I like the split headlight design. It follows the Taycan design language with the squint daytime running lights. The interior looks good, and as I said, it should be a bit more spacious than the outgoing model, so all good things there. Perfect. So what does that bring us to? The base price is just under £70,000. I put almost £15,000 of options on it, so we are basically looking at 85 grand for a decently spec'd example. I was intentionally trying to hold myself back not to go all crazy, But yeah, this is the world of German cars where everything is an option and the list price doesn't really mean anything, because if you want the car to actually be a premium car, you need to put at least 10 grand worth of options on them. It's important to mention the standard equipment because this is much improved compared to the Taycan. You've got a lot more stuff in here. The important ones being powered tailgate, because that used to be an option on the Taycan. You've got the all-wheel drive, obviously that's standard on the Macan, just like you would get that standard on the petrol version. You do get the steel spring suspension, unfortunately, so if you want air suspension, that's an extra. And crucially, all of them, at least for now, come with the single-speed gearbox. The dual-speed gearbox, even though it may sound as a fantastic idea on paper, I hated it in practice, so I'm very glad Porsche managed to get rid of that, but still maintain fantastic power figures. LED lights are standard, and as I mentioned, the electric folding mirrors are standard, so that's good. How generous of Porsche. Thank you very much. And yeah, that's it. All the kind of safety systems, they come as standard these days, so I'm afraid if you don't like the beeping and bonging, you will have to turn those off every time you jump in the car. On the electric side of things, it does come with a heat pump as standard, which helps a little bit with winter range. Your winter range will still be lower than your summer range, but the impact on cars with the heat pump is a bit less pronounced than on cars without the system fitted. You've got a wireless charger, you've got the Apple CarPlay, and you've got an 11 kilowatt onboard charger. So that's for your AC slow charging. From home it can take up to 11 kilowatts, even though in the UK that will probably not be very utilized because our maximum for most households is 7 kilowatts, because most houses only have single phase power supply, whereas 11 kilowatts is across 3 phases. Excellent. So you think, okay, this noob guy is a bit too basic, I want to go a bit extra. Well, if you want to go for the turbo version, I've spec'd one out as well. So I went for the nicer colors, the nicer wheels. You will see that if we look at the front actually, with the turbo, you do get a slightly different front bumper, which is a little bit more aggressive. So you see this one is a bit more rounded, whereas with the turbo, you've got these blades which continue into the headlight slash air vent area. And it does look very smart. I really do like this green color, but with all the options I put on it, and keep in mind I haven't maxed it out because I didn't have enough time to go through all the checkboxes, it brought the total price to £122,000, which is a lot of money, and you can go beyond that, as I said. So maybe just be a bit careful with the options and which ones you tick. What is important is that obviously with the turbo you do get the additional performance. Now, instead of 300 kilowatts, 470 in the launch control mode, which is 640 horsepower and over 1000 Newton meters of torque. So that car is going to be properly rapid. It doesn't impact the range too much. So what I would keep in mind is that it's the wheels rather than the drivetrain and how you drive which will impact your efficiency and how much you will get out of a charge the most, at least based on these initial numbers. So I wouldn't be too worried about the turbo in terms of range. You also get more standard equipment, just like with other Porsche models. The higher in the range you go, some things become standard. So for example, you get the sports seats with the 18-way adjustment. You also get the air suspension, you get the Porsche torque vectoring system, power steering plus, the matrix LED headlights. So in fact, quite a few of the options I already picked are on here. So it makes sense if you are really speccing your base model quite a lot with a lot of options to compare with the turbo, because that price jump may actually be a bit smaller than you initially thought, with the options already being fitted in the turbo. Okay, you say £122,000 for an electric car is a bit too much. So what other competitors are in this space? I'm afraid the much kind of hated among car enthusiasts Tesla Model Y is still the benchmark. If you are looking to compare it with the Macan, it's not really a comparable car. The Tesla, it will feel much less special. It's an excellent kind of daily car. The build quality has come a long way in the past year or so, so I wouldn't be too worried about that, but yeah, it will definitely not feel as special as a Porsche. The upside of that is that even if you go for the highest performance trim, that starts at £60,000, and with Tesla it's very simple to configure. You basically pick your color of the exterior, the interior, and that's it. There's no other options other than choosing which tier of autopilot you want, but you can unlock that post-purchase anyways. Yeah, that's option one. I imagine not many buyers will cross-shop these two, but if you want something competitive to the Porsche, which does have that kind of unique fit and finish on the inside, looks a bit more special, is not as common on the road, I would recommend looking at the Polestar 4. It's a very similarly sized car, actually a little bit lower to the ground, so it appears a bit sportier, has practically the same size battery pack at 100 kilowatt hours, with about 95 of those being usable. As standard, you only get a rear-wheel drive version, but you can very simply upgrade to the all-wheel drive for about £7,000 extra, and again you can kind of customize it to how you like it. Polestar does follow the Tesla model, where most of the customization is down to the color and the kind of interior trims, and most of the technology is nice and included as standard. If you really want to go with the, for example, Pro package, you get slightly nicer wheels, the gold striped seatbelts on the inside, and that's it really. Sunroof on these comes as standard. So yeah, you can play about with this if you want to, but the memo is that it comes out way below the price point of the Porsche. In fact, with Polestar you can even go for the Polestar 3, which is a higher end vehicle, even though the number is lower. It's a bigger car, it's almost like a Cayenne competitor, and that sits on air suspension, even bigger battery pack, slightly faster charging, and that will basically price match the Macan depending on configuration. With the Porsche you definitely still pay for the brand, but honestly the pricing is not too bad, and considering that Porsche recently hiked up the price of the Taycan lineup, unless you really hate SUVs, you would be crazy to buy the Taycan. They are a lot more money now, and they're less practical vehicles than this. This will get better range than the Taycan, even though it's a less aerodynamic package. So as I said, unless you want the excellent handling and the kind of sportiness of the Taycan, this will be the better fit for most people, unless you're obviously buying a Taycan on the used market, where you can get them for very cheap money now. So yeah, I think that's a good point to end the video on. Hopefully I haven't overloaded you with info. I'm not going to be buying any of them because I'm absolutely broke, but let me know in the comments which one you would go for. And in fact, with Porsche you can share a code or a direct link to the configurator, so I will leave mine for my kind of sensible configuration down in the description box, and you can do so in the comments as well. I would love to see what you come up with. Again, thank you very much for watching, and if you found the video helpful, give it a like. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.